Everybody can please mute themselves.
themselves. Also, it's going to look very weird as everyone who is participating as a committee member, please turn on your cameras if possible, so that those who are participating remotely can see who's talking. And yes,
You were muted, that is not.
I haven't quite not joined the audio.
Oh, Ed has not joined the audio.
Okay.
And apologies because my camera is here, but when I hear people speak, it's up there. So it looks like I'm looking away, but I'm actually just looking at the big projection in the room. If our clerk could please establish quorum and.
We have a quorum.
Okay, so.
Member, I'll do the roll call. Member Landry.
Present.
Member Hugh.
Here.
Member Liu. Member Swaminathan.
Here.
Member Lakshman. Member Lakshman. I see you're still connecting. I'll come back to Member Lakshman. Member Taria. Member Pacheco.
Present.
Member Souza. Member Carr. Member Lutz.
Here.
Member Hernandez.
Present.
Chair Eldridge.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So folks understand if you are a member of the CAC and you are participating in a location that was not properly posted, you can still participate in the discussion. You are indeed encouraged to participate in the discussion, but you cannot be counted towards quorum and you cannot vote, but you can still participate in discussion and are encouraged to do so.
Chair?
Yes.
I would just like to recognize that Member Lakshman is, his audio does not seem to be able to connect to our meeting. Also, Member Pacheco, is Member Pacheco in the room?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the right Zoom. I'm on the public Zoom, I believe.
Just keep
I see, okay.
You promote him.
Can you promote?
I am not able to promote Member Pacheco. I'm not sure that there's a technical issue.
We're working on that member being promoted now. So thank you to the folks who are participating remotely who did go through that process of noticing. We have folks joining us from a variety of locations, two in Fremont. And there were several members who are able to make it, but were not able to post according to the guidelines. So again, you can participate, but we can't vote. The first item that we're going to go to is public comment. And thank you for your patience with me, as this is the first in-person meeting I've done in some time. We're going to now go to public comment, and this item is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any EBCE related matters that are not otherwise on this meeting agenda. Do we have any members of the public with their hand raised, or have we received any written correspondence?
Yes, we have 3 hands raised. We have not received any written public comment.
Okay, then we can go, due to how late we're starting, if we could go for whatever, do it for 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
And make sure that this is on items not on this evening's agenda.
Great, thank you. Jessica Tovar, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And the comments I wanted to make today, well, first is around net energy metering. And as you all know, that the CPUC has pretty much gutted the incentives for folks who have rooftop or maybe some kind of solar system on their home or business, for example. So that incentive has been slashed, but I do think that this is a good opportunity for East Bay Community Energy to offer an incentive, a net energy metering incentive that's, you know, clearly better than the investor-owned utilities. And if anything, I think it should mirror or be better than what was referred to as net energy metering 2.0. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there has been a lot of inquiries at the local Clean Energy Alliance, as well as I did hear a member of the public bring up this issue back in January to the board. So I really want to encourage East Bay Community Energy to take some serious steps to actually offer a strong net energy metering incentive for the community that it serves. And in other comments, I just want to again uplift that the whole point of, you know, our advocacy for a community choice program in the East Bay area was to create more community benefits, more so than any investor-owned utility would ever offer. And one of those would be a net energy metering tariff, but also even go further than that and offer a feed-in tariff. Because if we can actually incentivize more solar, wind, and storage growth within the territory that makes up the East Bay, and do that more in our communities, then we can actually reap the benefits financially as well as environmentally from having produced local clean energy and rely less on that very expensive, volatile, type of energy that's out of state and, outsourcing our jobs, etc. So I really want to see more investment locally, and I really need your attention as the community advisory board. So thank you so much. Clean power to the people.
Thank you. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. I wanted to just bring this issue up in the hopes that maybe the CAC can figure out a way to address it. And that is that often the public comes in with a question or a request for information, and there's never any response to it. I'll give you an example. Last month, both Jessica and I asked for an update on the $15 million program that was supposed to be launched to replace gas-fired appliances, specifically, I think, induction ranges. And that program was supposed to have been discussed by the board in January, February, and hasn't. So it's like, what happened to it? The other thing that I've asked is that to indicate who is actually on these Zoom calls in some fashion. And the reason I ask is that it's apparent that staff members are participating in the calls, but we're unaware of their presence until suddenly they jump in to respond to something that somebody said. And I have to tell you that I'm uncomfortable with that approach. And I did ask Adrian about it, and he indicated that in the minutes of the meeting, there would be a list of the people who participated, but I haven't seen that happen yet. So I just, we talk about openness and transparency and everything. It'd just be good to know who's on these Zoom calls. Other organizations do it all the time, so it shouldn't be a problem. The other thing, Member Landry asked the chair to bring back a response to my concerns about GHGs in Bright Choice versus PG&E. And I know that Anna Olivia has been working on that, but I just wanted to remind her of that because I think that is an important question that shouldn't just sort of fade into the woodwork. So that's it. Thanks very much.
Oh, Actually, before you move on, Adrian, Tom, tonight's agenda item is addressing that issue in great part, and the rest of it is being agendized when it coincides with the board's agenda. I mean, we have those things on the list, and so I would like to, tonight's agenda item, we have someone calling in from the East Coast in order to be able to address part of that this evening. So I just want you to know that we are in fact listening, and we are agendizing things as quickly as we can in ways that staff have the ability to support. And so we really hear you and respect and are grateful for your participation, and that you are being heard, and that we have a discussion this evening planned around some of that. So just want you to know that.
Am I still on?
Yeah, you have
A couple of
30
seconds.
seconds.
Yeah, and Olivia, I saw that item on the agenda, but there's nothing attached. There's no staff report or anything, so it's kind of hard to know what to anticipate with that.
Your feedback's received for sure, and I'll work on agendizing in a more clear fashion that for sure could cause some confusion.
Thank you.
Audrey Ichinose, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks, Adrian. Audrey Ichinose, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I'll be brief. I really want to thank this whole setup. I mean, not because it really allows the public to participate. We don't have to go to a location. I really appreciate the facility of participating by Zoom. So thank you again very much. Secondly, I just want to repeat something that a public comment that I made at the board retreat last week, and that concerned EBCE following up that special board retreat with a second one that can address local clean energy development, not just its LB, local development business plan, but to kind of give us an overview of all of the things that programs that EBCE has mounted or will mount, progress so far, and information about this with respect to the percentage it represents in terms of budget allocations, but budget surplus allocations. Thanks very much.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
Thank you, Adrian. So our next item is approval of minutes from February 13th, 2023. I would be seeking a motion and a second and then discussion. Moved by member Lutz. Seconded by member Hernandez. Are there any members of the public with their hand raised on this agenda item, or have we received any written correspondence?
Yes, we have one member of the public with his hand raised.
Great.
Recognize Tom Kelly for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. Very quickly, I just wanted to point out that the way my comments were reported in the minutes, it states that I allege that EBCE failed to beat PG&E on greenhouse gases, but I'd actually sent some information to you that unfortunately didn't get delivered to you prior to the meeting, but it actually demonstrates that EBCE's greenhouse gas emissions are more than 5 times greater than PG&E. So I'd love to see that word allege taken out of there and maybe replaced with the word stated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion.
Is there any other public comment?
Yeah,
There's no further public comment at this time. There are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. We will now go to discussion from the CAC. And if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. I usually have the agenda. Okay, go for it, Chins.
There was a phrase in there that I don't think is quite correct.
Uh-huh.
It was long-term critical care facilities.
Which part are you looking at?
Oh, I knew you would ask that.
Are you talking about resilient critical facilities?
I think that's what it referred to.
Page 4, maybe? Remember, let's stated that the board had passed item 15.
It's under C4.
Second to last paragraph.
Okay,
It's actually the fourth paragraph of where agreement with Google was passed and approved. Long-term contracts were passed and agreement with long-term critical care facilities was approved. Don't think EVC has critical care facilities.
so as clarification, this is the contract around storage or something like that on critical facilities, is that correct?
Yes, I will need to go back and look at the item.
All right, so we will we will approve. So the motion would then be, if it is a friendly amendment, Member Litz, to approve the minutes as stated with the clarification of the long-term critical facilities or critical care facilities. We'll clarify that.
Yes.
Great. Is that amendment friendly to you?
I think also that the speaker mentioned the stated versus alleged comments, so we include that in the amendment.
I would suggest that we do not accept that feedback as it is an allegation at this point, and we'll be discussing that item this evening. And well, he did state it, so maybe we can come up with a better phrasing there. The allegation was stated. It has not been determined whether or not that is accurate, as further examination of the methodology used to calculate those emissions has not fully happened. And I believe that we'll be getting into that this evening.
Second.
Okay, so what we have at the moment is a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes pending clarification of the long-term facilities in the fourth paragraph of item C4 CAAC chair report. Seeing no further discussion, if we can take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Member Landry,
Yes.
Member Hugh,
Yes.
Member Liu, Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Lakshman,
Yes.
Member Tauria, Member Pacheco,
Abstain.
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 Thank you. Member Souza,
Member Souza is, I believe, not voting this evening.
Member Carr, Member Lutz,
Yes.
Member Hernandez, Member Hernandez,
Yes.
Chair Eldred.
Yes,
Minutes are approved.
thank you. It's actually very confusing not doing it on the computer when I'm so used to doing it on the computer. So it is actually harder. That's weird. All right, so the next agenda item is so motion passes with one abstention, and the rest, yes, from all members.
One abstention.
Sorry, Adrian, the sound didn't come through on what you just said?
No, my apologies, I interrupted you. Yes, yes with one abstention. And 1, 2, 3, 3 absences.
All right, perfect. So then we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the CAC chair report. Again, I really want to start with gratitude to staff for all the coordination and help in getting these meetings together, and all the help in getting remote locations posted, for making the policy change to keep the members of the public able to participate remotely. That was not how it was before, even though it was allowed before. So I just really want to recognize the amount of effort that have gone into keeping these meetings accessible. I know how much work the CEO has put into it, and all the way down to how much, like, every person has been really working on this. And so just a lot of gratitude. If you are a member of the CAC and you are having trouble finding a location to participate in remotely and the commute is too far, please reach out. I will help you find a location if at all possible. And yeah, so at the last staff meeting, at the last board meeting, so there was a closed session and there was nothing to report out of the closed session. At next meeting, there will be a substantial amount of closed session, and I would like to clarify from our clerk if that closed session is going to be happening at the beginning or the end of the meeting.
At the beginning of the meeting.
At the beginning of the meeting. So there will be substantial, my understanding anyways is that there will be substantial closed session happening at the beginning of the meeting, so folks should be prepared for that. There were other items discussed, including the travel reimbursement policy that the CAC discussed at the last meeting. I want you to know that it passed as originally presented, but that staff are taking a look at the feedback that we provided. They have been really proactive in reaching out and asking for connections and examples of the way that other area bodies are handling different kinds of travel reimbursements as in-person participation is required. So again, a lot of kudos to them for that. And they will be bringing that item back. The mid-year budget was heard and discussed with all of the feedback that came from us and feedback from the board as well. And that there was a special meeting that was held that was all about power procurement. And that discussion was so on point with feedback that we received pretty regularly from the public, and concerns and comments that members of this body have raised, that Marie has very graciously agreed to come tonight and help present part of that, the part that I think is the real common point of discussion in this body. Again, one point that Tom Kelly brings up fairly regularly. And so, and in that meeting, there was no solutions reached, but in that meeting, the board did request that some of this information come back to them. And I don't know if that'll be in April or not, but there was good discussion there. And so if it's going to be heard again, I really wanted us to have the opportunity to get at least an introduction to those concepts. And if you have not yet had a chance to watch that procurement meeting, whether you're a member of the CAC or a member of the public, please do. Staff did a phenomenal presentation. It was many hours long. So 2 hours long or more than that. And it was really well done. And there's a lot of information in it, and you should do some due diligence to watch that before the next meeting if you haven't had a chance to do it before tonight. So most of the rest of the agenda item on Wednesday is on tonight's discussion. It is a pretty light agenda next time. So that is all for the chair report. I don't know if there's any public comment or members of the public with their hands raised.
There are no members of the public with their hands raised.
Okay, great. Then seeing no internal discussion, any hands raised here? Nope. Then we will go on to, we're actually gonna, yeah. Oh, Cynthia has a question?
No, just a comment. I also want to thank the staff and, Adrian and, what's your? Yeah, what's it? Raisa? Yes, Raisa, for, the many accommodations that went in tonight to make this possible for the public and us to participate. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. So I believe that both items tonight are being presented by Marie, is that correct? Okay, so I know you are also on the East Coast, so thank you so much for taking the very late time to do this. The next item is agenda item number 5, and we'll just turn it over to Marie.
So the plan for this is to, I thought we were, I apologize. I thought we were doing the emissions one first. Excuse me. No, you're following the agenda, Adrian. I just confused myself. Okay, sorry, resetting my brain for a second. So this item is, as we typically do, if the CAC requests, I'll give a sort of sneak preview of deals being presented to the board in the upcoming board meeting seeking board approval. Next slide, please. As everyone can probably remember, and you can go to the next slide, Adrian. EBCE launched our 2022 long-term resource RFO in February of 2022, and we're slowly wrapping it up. This should be the last time that I use this exact same slide deck to present to the CAC and the board. We were soliciting resources largely to contribute hedges, RECs to meet our renewable portfolio standard obligations and to meet our customer commitments, and looking for new resources that can meet the CPUC's incremental resource procurement mandates that were laid out in 2019 and 2021. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the 6 different products that we solicited in the RFO. There's not, you don't have to pay a lot of attention to the names of the products. A couple of them are strangely worded, frankly, but they are direct references to things that were described in the CPUC's procurement mandate. But the point is, we were looking for generation and storage resources that could provide hedges to EBCE to, hedge our demand against high prices in the energy market, and resources that could provide resource adequacy as is required by the CPUC's procurement order. Next slide, or orders, I should say. We had a fairly robust response to the RFO, not as good as our 2020 RFO response. And we did end up securing board approval to execute 2 contracts in our service territory, the NextEra COLA contract that is in Tracy, and a resource adequacy only contract that is in Stockton, so what will be our service territory. Next slide, please. When we evaluate long-term assets or long-term deals, we evaluate the deals both quantitatively and qualitatively. On the qualitative side, we look at things like how many deals do we have executed with the particular counterparty? Are we doing too many deals with this particular counterparty? That if doing that creates a certain amount of risk for us. What's the development status of the resource or resources that we're looking to execute contracts with? Are they mature in the development process? Do they have interconnection agreements in place, site control, et cetera? These things make the deal more real than a project that doesn't have an interconnection agreement or doesn't have site control. That's not so much a project as it is an idea for a project. And then on the quantitative side, we calculate the net present value of the resources. And what that is, we look at what will the deal cost over its contract life of 10, 15, 20 years? And then what is the value associated with it? What revenues do we expect to get from the resource in the energy market or the deal in the energy market? What is the compliance value, either of the resource adequacy or of the RECs? And ideally, we'll move forward and negotiate and execute deals that have a positive net present value. That means that the benefit of the contract is greater than the cost, or I should say the forecasted benefit is greater than the forecasted cost. Our forecasts are always wrong, just like, weather forecasts are never exactly perfectly correct. When we forecast energy market prices going out 30 years into the future, it's a view of what might happen. It's always wrong, but it is a way of estimating based on certain conditions what could energy market prices look like. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of all of the projects that we have executed or that we've gotten board approval to execute contracts with from the RFO. And it's worth noting some of them were actually originated bilaterally, but everything was compared against the RFO projects offered to us. And what you see at the bottom, the Con Ed, VTOL, and the 2 Broadreach projects, those are all resource adequacy only projects. The top, they don't have any energy. It's just the compliance attribute of resource adequacy, which is important. We need that. The top 2, the first one, Long Road Sun Pond, that does have generation associated with it. And that's great because we need clean energy hedges. And then the second one, NextEracola, is a storage tolling contract. Storage doesn't generate electricity. It charges energy from the grid and then discharges and puts it back on the grid. So it performs a hedging and energy arbitrage function. But that's important to be aware of. Okay, next slide. And then this is a summary of all of the long-term generation or storage assets that EBCE had already contracted. We don't list all of our RA contracts on our website. It would just be too long of a list, but these are our long-term generation and storage tolls. And it's worth noting that the top 5 are resources that are online, and the bottom ones are resources that we are expecting to come online, in the coming months and going out the next few years. Next slide. So what are we seeking approval for today? This is a different deal structure than we have brought to the board before. This resource was not offered into our 2022 RFO. It was originally offered to us in 2020, and then we came back to it because we see value in this structure. And so what it is a financial transaction, a hedge, and technically 2 resource adequacy agreements. So when I will probably slip and talk about the resource, but it is not one resource, it is multiple resources. So it's really a contract for multiple products that are all, like lumped underneath the same umbrella. What we are contracting for is a financial transaction, a hedge, not physical energy. We are not buying physical electricity. We are doing a financial transaction that will provide an insurance policy to a portion of our demand. And we are transacting for resource adequacy from 2 new battery projects. The financial hedge will be physically backed by a natural gas plant that is an existing resource and an incremental, a new battery storage facility that's being built at the site of the natural gas plant. This is a 15-year contract. If approved, it will start delivery to us on April 1st of 2024. And it's a very mature project. I'll get into talking about the company that is behind all of this in a minute. What is interesting about this and very unique, by adding, so the gas plant is called Malaga. By adding storage where there is an existing gas plant, this will allow the gas plant to not run as much. So we're pretty excited about the ability to pay a capacity payment for storage and get the resource adequacy value, and have this financial transaction that provides an insurance policy to our customers, all while helping the gas plant run less than it would if the storage resource wasn't there. Next slide, please. Middle River Power is a fairly well-known independent power producer in the United States. They are backed by private equity. They own a number of generation assets throughout the country, mostly in the Western United States. Their portfolio of resources is primarily natural gas, and in recent years, they have gotten into developing energy storage as well. And they do have a little bit of solar in their portfolio also. They are in the process of developing 420 megawatts of co-located natural gas and battery storage within California. This is not developing new natural gas. No one's building new natural gas in California. And it's just worth noting that adding storage to a gas plant is not keeping the gas plant online longer. The gas plant is going to be online for 15, 20 more years as the state transitions to an entirely clean and carbon-free portfolio. But adding storage, like I said, is helping actually reduce the frequency that the gas plants will run. They have successfully developed a number of assets in California, like the solar project that I just mentioned, and they've developed a couple of battery facilities already in California, at least one co-located with a gas generator. And then they're also doing a geothermal project in Southern California. They actually just, in addition to having numerous contracts that are rolling off with PG&E, they just executed a very similar structure of agreement with, as the one that EBCE is proposing with San Jose Community Energy a few months ago. Next slide, please. This slide is something that I actually borrowed from the board retreat. What I want to point to in this slide, the sample week, both of these sample weeks are not actually representative of EBCE's real demand or our actual resource portfolio. This is just for illustrative purposes. For example, there's no offshore wind in our portfolio, so you can at this time. So it's really just illustrative purposes. But for a week in April, if the gray line represented EBCE's demand, and then the black line represented our gross consumption, our consumption after you back out charging energy, you would see that there are some times when our portfolio, a hypothetical portfolio, could have too many resources, over generation, more generation than demand. But then there are also a lot of times where there are these light gray bars that are below the black or the gray. The black and gray lines are on top of each other in a lot of places. There are these light gray bars that are below those lines. All of those light gray bars represent market purchases, times when a portfolio of clean energy resources, emissions-free resources, aren't actually generating and helping meet our demand. And so in the board retreat, we talked about how it's important to use a variety of different tools to help us meet our demand and protect our customers against price spikes in the energy market. And so some of those tools include long-term contracts for physical resources that generate electricity and from which we are buying the electric commodity. But another helpful tool is I should say, these financial hedge transactions, because they give us protection against prices and price spikes in the energy market during periods of time when our supply resources, our physical supply resources aren't there, or when they can't be generating. Basically, they give us an insurance policy during the periods of time that are the gray bars in these pictures. So that's the role of a financial hedge. It's an insurance policy that protects you against times when you might not have physical coverage. Next slide. I also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have experienced in the marketplace. It's been especially bad in the last 18 months or so. Everyone is familiar with the supply chain impacts that largely started with COVID. First, it was no toilet paper, then there were no, like batteries and flashlights, but all of, the same supply chain impacts that have made it hard to get your normal home good products are actually causing huge problems for constructing new resources. And so, I'll keep going. We've also experienced a lot of permitting delays, largely as a result or sort of like trickling out impact from COVID, as counties and different offices shut down due to COVID or lost employees during COVID. The permitting process has taken a lot longer, and that's made it hard for new generation resources or new energy storage resources to come online. Their supply chain is getting better. It's not totally resolved. Permitting delays are getting a little bit better, not totally resolved. Next up are interconnection delays. So East Bay and other CCAs, we're executing contracts for new resources to come online, but these resources, if they're located in California, they're either in PG&E or Southern California Edison's service territory, sometimes in San Diego Gas and Electric's territory. The local utility has to interconnect the projects. You can build a new solar farm or storage facility, but if PG&E doesn't allow it to interconnect to the transmission system, you just have a power plant that's sitting there that can't actually generate energy and deliver it anywhere. We are experiencing massive delays in interconnection, and these delays will continue for over a year. And that actually puts EBCE at a lot of risk in meeting some of our compliance obligations, but it's also risky for the state. And then there is the risk of additional governmental action. Similar, back in 2022, the US government Department of Commerce launched an investigation into the possible use of forced labor to make solar panels, and that caused a big disruption in the solar industry, and it resulted in a freeze in like all solar panels coming into the country because developers didn't know what they were going to have to do to prove that their panels were not made with forced labor. So there's a risk of additional actions coming out similar to the solar investigation, could be on more solar resources, could be on energy storage in the coming, couple of years. One thing that is nice about the Middle River deal is that we're getting a financial hedge, partly from an existing resource, but also from the storage that will be put in service. And then we're getting RA from an existing resource and from new resources. But if the new resources get delayed in coming online, we still get some benefit. We still get the financial hedge just not as much of it, and we still get the RA, just not as much of it, if any of these things delay the construction of the new assets. Next slide. So if the board approves this this unique deal structure, we'll finish negotiating the agreement and execute by the end of the month. And then we will be continuing to provide updates to the CPUC on our status in executing contracts for new resources as required by their near-term reliability and midterm reliability orders. Next slide. Okay, that's actually the end.
That was awesome. Thank you for that. So we're going to go first to public comments. Member Swaminathan, do you have a clarification or a question or discussion point?
A question, so I'll wait.
Okay, great. So then we'll go first to, thank you. We'll go first to public comment. Have there been any members of the public with their hands raised, or have we received any written correspondence on this item?
We have one member of the public with his hand raised.
Great, go for it.
Great. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. You know, it's hard for me to understand how EBCE, an organization that was started to try and fight climate change, would actually sign a contract with a fossil fuel company to basically keep a peaker plant operating. Now, you may say, well, it's going to operate anyway, but that's not the point. I mean, why should we be involved in actually participating in the further life of that particular plant? I mean, if we all stop contracting with peaker plants, maybe the peaker plants would go away. That one that we worked with on Vistra in Oakland, I mean, the whole purpose of that was to get rid of that dirty peaker plant there. A plant that was affecting the health of the people who lived there. So I hope that the board will, maybe other parts of this field are okay, but there's plenty of solar during the day everywhere in this state that is being curtailed during the day because there's so much of it. That's the source that should be providing those batteries with electricity, not a dirty gas-fired peaker plant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
There is no further public comment.
If we could move Tom as a panelist, it would be great. So we will now go to members of the CAC. Member Swaminathan, you had your hand raised. Would you like to start? Member Pacheco, if you could raise your hand online, it would be great.
Hi, Murray. Thank you for presenting. It's an interesting structure. I have a question on slide 6 and then a follow-up.
If you could pull up slide 6, please.
There was a mention of the price 5th percentile at 50% weight. Could you explain the weights of those? Why the 50% was weighed at those different weights for the different percentile prices?
Shall I speak to this right now?
That would be great.
Okay, so we use a variety of different forward curves that that have prices in every hour for 8,760 hours a year, going out about 30 years, and we have sort of different views of. There are different forward curves that sort of get at different situations. The P95 is, well, what if prices are really high? The P50 is what if prices are average, and then the P5, what if the prices are low? And so we heavily weight the value that we calculate from the low prices, because it gives us a little bit more protection. I mean, maybe prices will be high, but like most deals are going to look good against a high price world, because the hedge, whether it's a hedge or a financial hedge or a physical hedge, we're locking in a contract price as protection against market volatility and potentially high prices. So if we assume, like if we have assume the same amount of volatility in these different scenarios, but one of them is volatility that's just all at higher prices, well, of course, this deal is going to look really good compared to really high prices. So we are conservative and we look at, well, how does this deal look? Maybe there's going to be high prices, 25% weight, but let's assume that the prices are not so great. How does it look then? Does that make sense?
Yeah, my inclination was you would have weighed the P50 with 50th percentile, but I think I understand what you're trying to do here. Okay. The other question is, you talked about it being a financial hedge, and I understand that's RA plus financial hedge for the energy as insurance. How good insurance is it? Would it'll dispatch with the market, and then you will get the corresponding revenue whenever it dispatches, or is it dispatching in the duration where we are short?
So it is a peaker plant, and so it will dispatch with the market, but the market will dispatch this resource at times when prices are highest, and those are the times when we have the greatest risk of being short. So the evening hours when the sun is going down.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, well, when the sun is going down in the summer and also in the winter.
So whenever it's dispatched, the energy value is transferred.
Correct.
Got it.
The market price associated with what is generated or dispatched is transferred.
Okay.
So we don't take title to the energy. We just do a financial swap.
Very good. And I like the structure. With a previous public commenter, I think this is natural gas peakers would be there during the time when solar is not there. So I think this type of structure to keep the lights on is critical for the community. And I support these transactions. Thank you.
You are correct that the natural gas resources will be there when the solar resources are not there. The natural gas resources are also a huge part of the state's resource adequacy framework. And there are numerous resource adequacy. We cannot meet our resource adequacy requirements in California without contracting with natural gas resources. And an obligation of being in the resource adequacy program is that they have to bid and be available to the market. So there is literally no way for us to meet all of our resource adequacy requirements without including natural gas in our RA portfolio.
Yeah.
So it's going to be there.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, members from Minsan. All right, so Cynthia, you had your hand up too, right?
Yes.
Okay, oh, you're in the stack. I just wanted to make sure because you didn't go up online. Member Litz?
Yeah, I'm trying, what fraction of EBC's per contract, per power, RA and all that, what fraction is RA versus generation and storage? Is RA a big part or is this a small part? What, round numbers, percentage?
I am afraid I couldn't even begin to answer that question. Unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as like a set percentage. If we're talking about the number of actual agreements, we do individual agreements every month for resource adequacy. Sometimes we do a 1 month resource adequacy agreement. Sometimes we do a 1 year. Sometimes we do a 10 or 15 year resource adequacy agreement. So it's a number, that number varies every month. The same is true with our, we do a number of financial hedge transactions. And then we have a number of physical generation transactions, but I'm pretty sure. So there might be something that I'm forgetting, but to the best I can remember right now, I believe that all of our physical generation resources are included in the list on slide 8. And that's the list of physical assets that are in our long-term resource portfolio.
Would it be possible to generate the past month, the past 6 months? How much money did EBCE spend on generation? How much on resource adequacy? How much on...
That is part of our budgeting process. We look at how much we have spent, and we budget for how much we expect to spend going out into the future. So that is absolutely part of our budgeting process.
Is it possible to see what fraction of that budget, in past or future, how much of that is RA, how much of it is the other forms of types, how much is financial hedging, how much is physical hedging? I was just trying to understand is, we're supposed to buy energy, but we got to buy all these other things because of regulatory.
Yeah.
How much are these other things costing relative to the energy we actually have to buy?
This is going to be a very unsatisfying answer, so I fully recognize that. The best way to really explain this would be disclosing the actual numbers, and I know that we're not going to disclose the actual numbers in a public setting because that would make it harder for us to negotiate good deals for ourselves. So we keep those numbers close to our chest because we're trying to fight and get the best prices for our customers. But it's let's just sticking with RA for example purposes. If you had asked me 3 years ago, how much does RA cost? I would say, well, it varies over the course of the year, but on average, probably $4 or $5 a kilowatt month. If you ask me right now in 2023, how much does RA cost? I would tell you, well, it varies over the course of the year, but on average, getting close to $20 a kilowatt month. So the RA, this attribute, maybe it's more like 17. It has gotten, 3 to 4 times more expensive just in the last few years because there is not enough capacity available in the system. And so even if this is why it's not as simple as, well, what percentage of our budget is going to which attribute. The costs of the different attributes fluctuate over time. And so I'm just not sure that, let me take it back. I think I understand the question that you're asking, but off the top of my head, I don't know a good way to present it without disclosing everything.
I was thinking, like the Census Bureau does, aggregate things up so individual contracts wouldn't be revealed, but we would have an idea of how much, what's EBC's total budget for procurement, and then
I think that's part of our annual budget setting process, and right. That it wouldn't be. I don't believe it's disclosed to the entire CAC, but it is definitely something that is disclosed to the board, and I don't have the expertise in our budget setting process to know if Anna Olivia participates in that closed session meeting.
I would say that there's information that was presented at last month's meeting. The mid-year budget had some information in it, and I can take a look and see how close I could get to answering your question if I understand it better. But it's But I don't think that we're going to be able to produce an answer to that question at this time.
No, I'm not expecting it. I just want to get sort of a handle on, oh, here's this big chunk of money, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars that EPCE is spending. Of that, you know, 20% is RA or 75.
I'm going to interrupt you and just say that we're going to follow up and try and get a good answer that can be presented to the CAC in view of the time. We're going to move on from this question because we can't produce an answer at this time. So we will follow up on that and we'll take notes that that needs to happen. So I'm sorry that we can't answer that
I'm
satisfactorily.
not expecting an answer right now. Good.
Do you have further questions? Okay. So Member Landry, you physically raised your hand next in the stack.
Yeah, I am interested in Jim's inquiry also. I also have concerns about the gas peaker plant, and I understand that this is a hedge, and that we may not actually use this gas. Is that correct? And it's part of our resource adequacy in case we have to use this product. And I heard what you said about the fact that renewable energy may be more expensive or just may not be available. But I always think we should always default to solar, wind, and renewable energy whenever possible. And I know that one of the factors you mentioned here is cost. So how would cost weigh in? I mean, if there was availability for solar or wind and it was more expensive, and let's say gas was cheaper, would you default to gas over wind and solar? And the other thing I want to say is that in terms of the long run, it may, I mean, in the short run, rather, it may be cheaper, but we have to look at the long range, consequences of, using more fossil fuels in terms of our, climate, in California and, throughout the country and the world. So I know it's, so anyways, can you just, and then the last question I want to ask is, you also mentioned with this peaker plant, 2 new batteries. Is that battery storage for solar? So if you could address those questions, please.
Let me repeat this back to make sure that I'm answering the right question. So a part of your question is, okay, so is the battery storage for solar or for something else? Yeah. Number one. And then sort of a general question around, are we choosing to contract with gas and not contract for renewable energy, or is the gas financially better? Basically, is it like displacing contracting for renewable energy? Is that the question?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious as to how much cost plays a factor in what you choose.
So value plays a factor. We look at the net present value, and so cost is a component of that. But I can assure you that this financial transaction does not displace any contracting for physical energy. We still have to go out and sign more contracts for energy resources. We need more carbon-free and renewable energy to meet our long-term commitments. This transaction is an insurance policy where we will pay a certain price per megawatt hour. It's actually a capacity price and a little bit of a price per megawatt hour. And if the resource generates, or if it clears, I should say, if it clears through the market, because sometimes a resource clears in the day ahead, then doesn't generate in real time. It's very weedy. If it clears through the market, then revenues will be passed on to us. And it protects our demand that might be like in 10 years time. Let's say we have 100% forecast coverage of our demand with all renewable resources. Let's say that we have that in 10 years time. This financial structure would still be valuable to us because of the possibility that on a hot day in September, our demand might come in higher than we forecasted. And we had contracted for renewables to meet our demand, but the demand came in higher. So that's where the insurance policy comes in. It protects us against, oops, more demand, we're not covered now, but this financial insurance policy is valuable. So we still are on our way to having 100% renewable, I shouldn't say that, 100% carbon-free energy to meet our demand going out into the future, consistent with the emissions reduction schedule approved by the board back in 2020. I'm pretty sure it was 2020. That's still our plan. But the insurance policy protects us against, like, oops, surprise, extra hot day. We contracted for average demand, and we're now at a P95, a less likely probability outcome.
So this,
I'm just going to take a moment and say, I would like to just remind folks that it's 7:25 and we have a very meaty item coming up. So ask your questions, don't hold those back, but to be conscious about conciseness and to ask your questions so that we can keep going.
so what you're essentially saying is this is the default product. Should we underestimate our demand? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's an insurance policy against exposure to high prices.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I really don't want to cut you
No,
off.
that's adequate for now. Yes, thank you.
Member let your hand is still up. I think it, yeah. Okay. Member Pacheco?
Thank you for
I'm getting duplicate sound. I can't hear. Okay.
Can you hear me without the echo?
Now it's good.
Okay, thank you for the presentation on procurement and for the details on this instrument or this contract that you're working on. Appreciated. A couple questions. Number one, is there more details on this contract in one of the previous meetings to the board? Is there more details that are already out there that I can look at?
There's a little bit more detail in the board memo, but this structure has never been presented anywhere before by EBCE.
And one of my other questions was, has this structure been used anywhere else? Or did?
Yes, fundamentally, the financial hedge structure is something that is an existing part of our portfolio. They're just shorter term transactions. So like we're doing them now. They're just not for more than 10 years. And I can also share that San Jose Clean Energy executed a very similar structure 2 months ago, I want to say, that where it was an existing gas peaker plant, new storage being added next to it so that the storage can be dispatched and try to minimize how much the gas plant runs.
Okay, and to be clear, and I'm not an economist or an engineer, so I mean, when I was talking about structure, I'm actually not talking about hedge structures. I'm sure there's a million varieties that have been used for decades and decades. I'm talking about this particular structure of battery storage with a peaker plant. And so I understand that we have an obligation, a legal obligation to to capture so much RA, and the agency is doing what it can to meet that obligation. It sounds like you guys are coming up with some unique or unusual structures to try to do that. I do have a couple of concerns, and some of my concerns may be just because I don't fully understand how this is supposed to work. I know that for instance, the Russell City Energy Center in Hayward, it was supposed to be an energy producer that basically took the market for the next 20 years. But what happened was that the city of Hayward passed basically a natural gas tax. And so the production, the actual natural gas burnt and the energy produced by Russell City Energy went down by, I think, like 80%, and it has stayed down there. And the point of me saying this is that I am a little worried, not fully understanding this, about whether or not there's an unintended consequence where we actually do subsidize the longer existence of this. Is this the Fresno peaker plant? This is in Fresno?
That is correct.
Okay, so it's in one of the dirtiest air basins in the country, if not the dirtiest air basin in the country, and which adds another layer of concern. I know that I'd like to hear more about why we think this would actually cause the peaker plant to run less, and that may be true, but I also know that there are other forces, like the two things that will limit a plant's production are it's not profitable to the operator. That could be because there's no demand or because its cost of operating is too high. And I am just off of hearing this for the first time tonight, sounding like we may be subsidizing in a way through this innovative technique, a way for that plant to be more profitable for a longer period of time. So can you speak a little bit more about why we believe this would actually lessen the amount of hours the power plant is operating?
Sure. So the underlying gas plant is a peaker plant. It does not typically get called on every day, but with all conventional thermal generating resources, when you turn them on, they have a minimum runtime. I believe this one's minimum runtime is 4 hours. That might not be exactly accurate. But so let's say it's 4 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours. You turn it on, it has to run for 3 hours, and then it shuts down. But it kicks off emissions to start it up. And then once it's actually running, the emissions are lower. It's more efficient when it's in the generating. So you kick off a lot of emissions to start it up. And so what tends to happen with these things is they're only needed for a short period of time, but you're incurring the emissions cost. So you have to keep it on for a minimum of 3 hours. So then maybe you say, well, I need it tomorrow at the same time. It kicks off so many emissions to turn it on and off. I'll just keep it running, idling at the lowest level. So they end up running a lot more than they need to because of the cost, the emissions cost of starting them up and shutting them down. There are times when just having an extra hour of energy would be helpful. And so that's where the value of a 1 hour battery, that is the battery at this gas plant will be the same size as the gas plant. They're 96 megawatt gas plant, 96 megawatt 1 hour battery. And it was sized this way and configured this way because there's historic evidence that having the ability to just push an additional 96 megawatts out to the grid for 1 hour would have eliminated the need to bring on the peaker plant.
Thank you. That's helpful. And continuing just to think this through in ignorance of a lot of details here. So having that battery dispatch available, the thought is that we don't have to fire up the power plant for 3 or 4 hours. But as we know, energy demand is going to go up with heat and whatnot. And if there's no pinch point of the amount of transmission lines, what's to stop them from dispatching the battery power to one customer, us in San Jose, and firing up the power plant to 7 other CCAs and PG&E? I mean, how are we saying, great, use the batteries, do not turn on the peaker plant?
We will not have the ability to control how the CAISO calls on it. 2 things to be aware of. We we don't own any rights to the actual energy. So the energy from the battery isn't coming to us and the gas plant energy going somewhere else. And candidly, that's not how the electric system works. Even if you contract, like, I only want solar energy for me. If you live next to like the nuclear power plant in San Luis Obispo, but you say I only want solar, you're getting nuclear energy. That's just physics. That's how the system works. There's no directing an electron to go to one place or the other. But this project, as I said, 96 megawatt gas plant, 96 megawatt storage. Its total interconnection to the transmission system is 96 megawatts. It cannot discharge storage and put gas energy onto the grid at the same time. It's the hookup just won't allow it.
So just to clarify, just to basically repeat back what you said, because that's what I was thinking. The only thing that can stop them from running both at the same time, even though we're not buying the energy. So the transmission
interconnection
is 96, so they can't. Okay, thank you. That helps me get an idea of this to be a little less concerned. Thank you.
All right, so Member Pacheco, if you could lower your hand if you are done with your questions. Thanks. So I have a couple follow-ups here. That was really helpful to organize this. So a couple clarifications from the presentation, and then we'll get a little bit more into this thing. Did you say forced labor, like slavery? There's a slavery lawsuit or investigation being happening right now?
Yes.
Awesome. And EVCE is taking some form of step to make sure that we are not purchasing blood panels from anyone?
At a high level, yes, but it's really not directly relevant to this particular.
Okay, that's terrifying. Okay, so I also want to support what Marie was saying about the interconnection delays. There are hospitals that have been waiting years. There are like all these things that are happening. CCAs across the state are having exceptional delays in hooking up even EV charging stations and all those kinds of things. And I do want to make sure that EVCE staff know that ABAG and the Association of Bay Area Governments and some other bodies are looking at some of the legislation that's moving in this area on a city by city and bless you, and county by county effort, and looking at maybe trying to do a broader, more regional response to these absolutely unacceptable interconnection delays that are affecting all sorts of folks, and just make sure that we get tied in with that. And I really, I also want to say that I'm really concerned about contracting with a gas plant in Fresno. Like, there's a lot of environmental justice issues that come up around this. There's a lot of environmental health and public health issues that come up across this. You mentioned efficiency, like a power plant is significantly less efficient than a gas stove, although using a burning gas in a power plant has some effects that are positive compared to burning gas in a home. But like there's some real concerns here. During your presentation at the procurement meeting, you had this really powerful slide about the amount of curtailment that's happening with solar and wind. And I'm hoping, like really disturbing slide around curtailment on that front. And I'm wondering why we would put a battery on a gas plant as opposed to putting batteries on these curtailed solar and wind. We could release an hour of energy from those places just as easily. And if one of the batteries is at the gas plant.
And Olivia, and it's not, it's next to the gas plant and it shares interconnection, it's not charging from the gas. It will charge from the grid. So it will suck up that solar that would otherwise be curtailed.
Okay, so.
Yeah, it's not charging from the gas plant. It can charge from the grid.
It could charge from the grid.
It will, because that will be the cheapest thing. You would never want to charge a battery. You have to pay for the gas plant to generate. It wouldn't make any economic sense to pay to charge it and then discharge when you can pay for the battery to be charged, or get paid for the battery, get paid for the battery to be charged and then discharge and get paid for that too.
Okay.
That's just economically rational.
That makes a lot more sense and is a helpful clarification, that those batteries would be helping address curtailment. I just, so if you could do I guess I still have some real concerns around signing a contract with a gas plant, because I do know that we are subsidizing that. And why, can you just explain why it is better to sign this resource adequacy instead of doing additional battery storage?
So back in the board retreat, we talked about how like if we do a 100 megawatt solar project, we don't get 100 megawatts of RA from the solar project. The amount that we get actually varies every month. In January, it's 0. And in July to August, it's 17. I can't remember all of the exact numbers because it varies throughout the year. So let's say 0 in January, 17 in July. With storage, 100 megawatts of storage, we don't get 100 megawatts of RA. With a gas plant, 96 megawatts of gas plant, 96 megawatts of RA. So the bang for the buck with gas plant RA is better, and it can fit into it. We also talked in the board retreat about how we're switching from our 1 RA obligation number per month to a very confusing structure where we will have 24 different numbers we have to meet over the course of the month. So it's a demand curve, like the demand curve of a day for energy. Similar, but not the exact same. Everyone is going to have natural gas in like the base of their RA portfolios within the slice of day construct. We just will have to. And even today, with the way that the RA rules are set up, there's like different buckets and different types. You have to have RA in your portfolio now. So we are many years away from being able to meet our RA obligation. The state is many years away from being able to meet its RA obligation without gas plants. There are not a lot of valuable RA resources that can really help us meet our obligations. And this does it. It doesn't completely meet our obligation. We still need a whole bunch more. But we absolutely do need these resources to meet our RA obligations. The question is not, will we or will we not have gas in our RA portfolio? We will. We absolutely will. We do now. We will going into the future. The question is, can we sign a 15-year contract for it and lock it in and provide us with a little bit of guarantee that it's going to be there for our compliance needs?
Right, so that makes sense to me. I like that it's matched with the batteries. That makes sense to me. And again, 742, so I want to move on. The logic behind signing a 15-year contract with record high gas prices is?
Again, we're not buying the energy. We're not buying the gas.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
perfect. So that addresses every question that I've received. Thank you for that. So in recognition of it being 7:42, this is an action item. If we choose, We could make a motion to support, we could make a motion not to support, we could give other feedback to the board. We don't have to take an action on this. Would somebody like to make a motion, or would you like to move on?
I would like to make a motion.
Go for it. What motion is it?
To support staff's recommendation.
To support staff recommendation. Excellent. Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
All right, we're gonna go with a motion by member Swaminathan and a second by member Lakshman.
Which I,
Pardon? Oh, Vijay, sorry. Good. To support staff's motion to sign a 15-year resource adequacy contract with battery storage. There's a better way to frame that, but we'll get the actual motion in. So with that, can we please have a roll call vote?
Thank you. Member Landry,
Abstain.
Member Hugh,
Abstain.
Member Liu, Member Swaminathan, Member Swaminathan,
Yes.
Member Lakshman,
yes.
Member Taria, Member Cheka,
Abstain.
Member Souza, Member Carr, Member Lutz,
Reluctant, yes.
Member Hernandez,
Abstain.
Chair Eldred.
What should we need to pass the vote?
Excuse me?
Huh?
I didn't hear your question.
How many votes does it take to pass?
7.
7? Yeah.
Oh, wait, hold on. 4, sorry. With the number of absences we have today.
We'll also go, I will go with a reluctant yes.
Okay. The tie.
Yes.
4 to 4, abstain. I mean, yeah, so.
The results will be reported as they were voted on for sure. So but make it technically a pass or not?
Yes, I think so. I'll need to.
We'll verify that for the minute. All right, so moving on to the next agenda item, emissions reporting. So I'm going to get it's 7:46. We have a fantastic staff member, Marie. Thank you so much. Who again is on the East Coast, so it's very late there. And I requested that this item come onto the agenda. Again, there is a full presentation that is available for you to watch. I encourage you to watch that full presentation. I asked if staff could provide a brief overview of the existing presentation, specifically so we could have a discussion around our power mix and some of the emissions that are associated with it. So I'm not sure how they decided to proceed with this item, but again, this is an introduction to the CAC, that this exists, that you should watch this and give us a little bit of a time to have a discussion and ask some questions before this agenda item comes back to the board. So there will be another opportunity to have more discussion on it. Okay, Marie?
We are going to, so Anne Olivia had highlighted a particular section of interest, and Izzy Carson from the Power Resources team spoke to this section during the board retreat. And so we're just going to play her description and her narration along with presenting slide 22 from the board retreat. Izzy spoke to it far better than I ever could. So here's Izzy.
So here we have EBC's 2021 power content label. So you can see here how this resembles that nutrition label that I mentioned. Shows the emissions factor by product for the calendar year 2021 on that top left. And then we also have the content from each of our plans by resource as a percent of total retail sales on the right. So again, this is the annual requirement. If we compared this particular power content label from to the prior year, you see that the Bright Choice emissions went down and the renewable content went up. Again, we have this board, UC has a board adopted schedule for the annual reductions in Bright Choice, and this is in line with that schedule. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the emissions factor that's being reported. I think it's important to clarify a little bit what that number represents and how that's changed in recent years and what it's showing. So that's again that top number on the left under that Bright Choice. And there's really two things that are driving that emissions factor. One is that in 2020, California changed its emissions accounting standards from sort of a global methodology to a California-specific methodology. So, a few slides back, we talked about those PCC2 RECs, and EBC does purchase a portion of our renewables as these PCC2 RECs. Again, these are a renewable product that are counted as renewable under the RPS program. They are by and large solar, wind, and hydro resources. They're generated outside of California. So there's clean energy being generated and there's emissions being reduced. It's just that those emissions are being reduced in another state. And because of that, under this California specific methodology, the new accounting adds an emission factor to these resources. So yes, the out-of-state numbers, mostly those PCC2s do put an emissions burden on that program, but at the same time, we've established pretty robust targets to ensure that our plan has less emissions over time and headed towards that 2030 target. The second piece that contributes to that is really that the EDC does not take the allocation of nuclear. And so that emissions number is a reflection of the trade-off between having nuclear and lower greenhouse gas emissions and not having nuclear and accepting higher greenhouse gas emissions due to buying a portion of our energy from the market where you get this average emissions factor. Looks like there's a couple of questions.
Member Eldred, would you like to go first?
I'm happy to wait for Pleasanton to go first.
Okay, member who?
I think it's me. She just gets the camera. So member Balch, a quick question on the PCC2s, right? So if we were to evaluate the number you're saying again, I'm kind of asking, is it a prescribed number because the emissions are generated in another state? So if we were to look at that, that is prescribed, I presume, due to transmission. Factoring that out, does Bright Choice do better?
Yes, factoring it out. Sorry, echo. Yeah, factoring it out, Bright Choice definitely does do better. The PCC2s are hit with an emissions factor that's equal to unspecified power. So even if those renewable energy credits are paired with renewable energy before they come in, they're still hit with that emissions factor. So yeah, definitely would impact that number and reduce it. If you look at the numbers prior to the California specific methodology, when the climate registry was used, the numbers are definitely significantly lower.
Okay, does it achieve lower than the California utility average? As presented on the right here?
I think the California utility average is, it's not really an apples to apples comparison. So it really takes—
The chart lends itself to be comparable, right? I'm looking at the line in the bar chart here, right? Are they not comparable?
If you, well,
can I speak to this? So the utilities have resources in their portfolio that if they were contracted today, they would be characterized as PCC2 resources, but the utilities signed some of their renewable contracts before there was an RPS and before the PCC portfolio content category structure existed. And so like I worked at PG&E for a long time. I can rattle off names of their PCC2 projects that are in Oregon, Washington, and used to be in Alberta, Canada. Those resources were grandfathered into counting as if they were a PCC1 resource, because the Public Utilities Commission realized, hey, we created this construct of different categories of resources after we approved you to go out and execute these contracts. So the utilities have a few, not a ton, but they have a few resources that count, that are PCC2, but for emissions and RPS purposes, count as if they are PCC1, number one. And then number two, the California utility average includes nuclear energy. And so that does play a significant role in reducing the emissions content of PG&E's portfolio. Does that make sense?
Yeah, not only does it make sense, I got a follow-up, which is, okay, so I'm going to ask it a slightly different way. If the Bright Choice has PCC2s, which get an arbitrary allocation because it's emissions in a different state that we don't get a count here at EBCE or in California. If we were to internally, because I know it's not for external reporting, but if we were to internally look at that, do we beat the California industry average?
I don't think that we have an answer to that. I'm not sure that we've done that comparison.
Okay, I'm not asking you to, that would be more work, but thank you for letting me know.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I would just add really quick that if you look at the percentage of renewables, I think the short answer to that question is yes. Our renewables percentage, which includes PCC2s, is a comparable number to the 2021 California Power Mix renewables number. Those are two important numbers that our board has said we really want to focus on renewables and large hydroelectric. So I think the complicating factor of why we would need to kind of rerun some numbers is because if you're going to account for nuclear within the mix of California power mix, then yes, there's a little bit more to do to calculate that.
Let me rephrase where I'm going.
I think we can probably stop, at least pause here. We can always hit the play button again. So as I said, Izzy spoke to this topic beautifully. We weren't totally clear how much or what parts Anna Olivia wanted shared. So I wanted to stop here.
All right, so after the presentation, I did get some feedback from the public that they hadn't been able to make their public comments. And we did want to provide an opportunity for that. This is
EBCE is to reduce emissions overall.
Oops.
Pardon?
That was the presentation.
So this is a really in-depth, very good look at what's happening. Please take the time before the next meeting to watch it. There's definitely going to be some questions. I've done a significant amount of research since that presentation. It's really good. It was really, really good. And so I have some follow-up questions, but we've had a lot of presentation through the past on our power mix and whatnot. So I know there's some outstanding questions. I do want to go first to public comment just in recognition of time. And ask if there are any members of the public with their hand raised or if we've received any written correspondence on this item.
Yes, there's one member of the public with his hand raised. Go ahead and recognize Tom Kelly.
Thank you, Adrian. So I'm not exactly sure, Anna Olivia, what this presentation was intended to clarify. I mean, the power content label issued for 2020, the power content labels all demonstrate that PG&E and most of the other Northern California CCAs beat EBCE on GHG emissions. So, I mean, I don't, I think there's some hair splitting going on here. I think the bottom line is that if a Peninsula Clean Energy, which is a smaller CCA than us, can offer a 5% discount on a power supply that's 100% carbon free. And by the way, by 2025, they'll be 100% renewable, 99% renewable, 24/7. I mean, that's how far they have come. Their emissions factor was 5 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour in 2020. Ours is close to 600. So the other thing I want to mention is with those PCC2 RECs, when they're purchased, those RECs are applied to the renewable portfolio standard that we're required to meet for the state of California. While that electricity is being consumed somewhere else, but not here in California, system power is being put onto the California grid in order to provide the electricity that we're not getting from out of state. So that's where we get caught, because you look at our power content label, you can see that we're relying on 40% of the power in Bright Choice for system power. So what happened to in 2018 and 2019 when PG&E had lots of nuclear and we beat PG&E those 2 years in a row. And then suddenly our GHGs ballooned to over almost 600 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour in 2020. So, I mean, let's come clean. Let's do what MCE and PCE and Sonoma Clean Power are doing. Or explain to us why we can't. I mean, is it because we don't have the ability to match that? Or is there some other reason that we're not devoting everything we can to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with Bright Choice? Tell me, what is it?
Thank you. All right, are there any members of the public with their hand raised?
There are no members of the public with their hands raised.
Have we received any written correspondence on this item?
We have not received any written correspondence on this item.
Great, and members, 1 minute on, I see your hand up. I am going to ask a couple clarifying questions. There was an email sent out asking folks to watch the whole presentation prior to this meeting. I don't know who had the opportunity to do that. I was able to participate in the original one, so I did have the advantage of seeing it, and I wanted to get a couple clarifiers that may help first. So the first one is a significant portion of our base product, Bright Choice, is listed as unspecified power. In previous presentations, it was stated that much of that unspecified power is in fact asset controlling supplier. Is that still accurate, or has asset controlling supplier been split out into other parts of our reporting?
I can take that one if you want.
Thanks, Jim. I was just going to say I need to phone a friend.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So starting in our reporting on the 2020 year, which we did in 2021, the asset controlling supplied were split out to their representative fuel type. Now, there was still some unspecified and what's called other renewable in there, and those would flow to those categories, but the majority of it flowed into the large hydro category to the tune of about 80% or so.
Yeah, so our asset controlling supplier is like significantly hydro from Columbia River Gorge, is that correct?
That's correct. I wouldn't say localized just Columbia River Gorge, but it is significantly hydro.
Okay, so that 40% really is not that power source. That's unfortunate. Okay, so the other thing that was brought up, and I think this speaks a little bit to Tom's concern, is looking at the different kinds of mechanisms that are available for reporting and how confusing and maybe unrepresentative a power content label is on what somebody's actual energy cost would be. That is fun. I looked up the K10 annual reports. And for folks who don't know what that is, K10, the Form K10 provides an overview of a company's business and financial conditions, includes audited financial statements, and it can have a better a better representation of the energy that a load serving entity is actually creating and using. And it appears that that significant drop has a lot to do, like in our comparative emissions reporting, has a lot to do with like PG&E's emissions dropped significantly when they lost over half their customers to CCAs. And so they have this power, they've got these long-term contracts, they sort of get to choose what they put on the power content label. So they can, and then they choose which power they sell into the grid. So as Marie, I just want to make sure this understanding is correct. As Marie said earlier, if you live near Diablo Canyon, you're getting nuclear energy. It doesn't matter what it says on paper. PG&E is creating through purchase or actual generation all this gas, and they're just choosing to put that onto the grid and taking credit for the other power. Is that an accurate understanding or no? I know it's a very simplified, but.
More harsh, and I don't think that it's quite like that. I know you're not meaning to make it sound nefarious, but like it almost sounds nefarious, and it's not like they're not like breaking any rules or anything like that. But to your point, yes, they have a lot of vintage, very old renewable generation contracts. Some of that they resell and we buy for our customers, but they don't necessarily have to resell it. And so there is some optionality in how they perform.
Okay. All right, I guess that was my clarification of things. I have some other questions, but I'll wait. Member Swaminathan, would you like to ask yours first?
Yeah, mine was more of a comment. I think what will be helpful is a time series graphic of what the power content label pounds per megawatt hour is over time for different scenarios. That may help illuminate this discussion when we have it next time. Just a suggestion.
Noted. Thank you.
I will make, I guess my concern in looking at stuff, and I haven't, I don't fully understand it because it is all a little bit weird. But I am a little concerned that it seems like EBC is attributing 100% renewable to our 100% renewable product, even though we know that it is not actually running on 100% renewable energy because we don't have 24-hour coverage of 20% renewable. It's just that amount of power we're purchasing of renewable energy. And so everything with a higher carbon cost associated to it is being attributed to our base product. And it seems counter to what we should be doing. It seems like we should be greening our base product as quickly as possible, right, so that the carbon emissions are not being attributed to folks who can't afford to purchase the 100% renewable product. And I will wait till more information comes out, and I definitely have a lot more digesting to do of this information, but I am concerned that we are dirtying our base product in order to say this product is 100% renewable. And I would like to see more attention paid to our base product. And I have not looked at PCE's, the claim that Tom just made about the projection to be 95% local or something like that. Like, that's amazing. But I haven't looked at that at all, so I will follow up on that. But it's 8:10, and the purpose of bringing this here was actually to try and have that presentation was so good, and I was hoping to get a presentation about our procurement and give people the opportunity to have a discussion about our procurement, and that is not totally how that item went tonight, but staff did not have very much notice at all. This request was made really last minute in hopes that they could use a presentation that already existed. I didn't realize we would have to go through the item quite so quickly, so we will return to have a more full discussion on procurement and generation at a later date for sure. But please do take advantage of the resource that we have. They did a great job. It does require 2 hours of time outside of this meeting, but I'm sure we can find that. So are there other questions that people would like to ask? And it's totally not the way I thought this meeting would go. I thought this one would take a long time and the other one would be quick. Yeah, remember this.
To echo what Tom Kelly is saying, why do the emissions power content labels for the other Northern California CCAs, our compatriots in the Bay Area, why are their power content labels so much cleaner than the EBCEs if they are facing sort of the same issues? And I'm not expecting an answer because I want to go home too, but that's a really big question is, why do they look so clean when ours doesn't?
And I did get a chance to take a look at staff's claim that it was because all of the people who had not taken nuclear had, well, okay, they didn't actually say it was more expensive than PG&E. It says they didn't have a stated purpose to be less expensive than PG&E. But some of them have managed to have lower carbon intensity than we do, not take the nuclear power and still offer a price discount, even if they haven't formally stated that as their mission. So I would be interested in hearing a response to that.
We don't go through every CCA and PG&E service territories power content labels and their forecasted discounts. So I know that on a forward-looking basis, not every CCA plans to offer a discount, and I know that that some CCAs did take the nuclear allocation, and EBCE's board chose not to take the nuclear allocation, which would have saved us money, and still to go forward and guarantee a discount. And so that's the hand of cards that we chose for ourselves and that we operated within.
Okay. Are you good?
No, I want to go home.
Yeah, okay.
I want to leave the question.
All right. So thank you for being here, Marie. I know it's really late. The information you provide is always solid and really well done, and there's a lot of gratitude for it. And thank you for taking the time, especially without much notice. So with that, we will move to the next item, which is CAC member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future CAC agendas, which will be recorded and we get to as we can. Are there requests that have not previously been made? So first, are there any members of the public with their hands raised or written correspondence received on this item?
There are no members of the public with their hands raised.
Okay.
Or written.
Member Hernandez?
Thank you very much for the presentation and details today. And I was just on the website for East Bay Community Energy Service Plans Residential. Although we're supposed to be 3% below PG&E, it looks like you might, be, less than a percent cheaper on the scenarios. So it'd be interesting to look at the website and show that, it does show that we're 3% cheaper on the website, on the East Bay Community Energy service plans, residential, choose your plan. If you look like we're like, based on the scenario that's on that website, it doesn't really show 3%, it shows like less than a percent or not even as much. It'd be better to see the examples that we are truly doing that 3%. So I'm just sharing that information. And of course, the Renewable 100 is the more expensive, but the more value-based program around solar and wind, where our Bright Choice is less expensive, but minimally to PG&E. So it's just interesting to see that public-facing page that really show the big value there. So something for consideration for future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have two. One is very exciting. On Wednesday, a new board member will be sworn in. Dan Wright will be sworn in as a member of the board representing Stockton. They did pass the steps that were necessary in order for them to actually come on board. So that's really exciting. If anyone would like to join either in person or via webcast to welcome him, that will be wonderful. The second is kind of more of an announcement. We received a request from an Eagle Scout who really wants to do a very cool project and was hoping to do it with EBCE, but we don't have staff capacity at this time to be able to support him. If anyone knows of a community group or a member city who may be interested in supporting an Eagle Scout project on like customer participation in demand response and energy efficiency, it just sounds like the coolest thing. But they do need a partner to get information from, and their end goal is to be able to go out into public spaces and do education to the public about how they can help curb peak power use. And so if anyone knows of anyone or are part of a city or some other group that wants to participate in that, please contact me. I would be thrilled to connect you. AJ?
Yes, I just wanted to provide clarification on that C5 MRP Malaga vote. I needed to look at the vote count very carefully. I kept on miscounting it. With 4 votes, 4 yes votes, 4 abstain votes, and 4 absences, the motion failed. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will adjourn this meeting to Monday, April 17th, 2023 at 6 p.m.
Thank you.